What is love? The desert asked. Love is the falcon's flight over your sands, because for him you are a green field, from which he always returns with game. He knows your rocks, your dunes, and your mountains, and you are generous to him. The falcon's beak carries bits of me myself, the desert said. For years I care for his game, feeding it with the little water that I have, and then I show him where the game is. And one day, as I enjoy the fact that his game thrives on my surface, the falcon dives out of the sky and takes away what I've created. But that's why you created the game in the first place, the boy answered, to nourish the falcon. And the falcon then nourishes man. And eventually, man will nourish your sands where the game will once again flourish. That's how the world goes. So, is that what love is? Yes, that's what love is. It's what makes the game become the falcon become man, and man in its turn the desert. It's what turns lead to gold and makes the gold return to the earth. I don't understand what you're talking about, the desert said. And we're gonna see if we can understand what he's talking about. That
Who up,
that's what we're here to do.
who up nourishing the falcon right now?
Socialist shelf. Be good, goods, and organize yourself. Socialist shelf. Be good, goods, and organize yourself.
You're now listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome to the Socialist Shelf. We are talking about The Alchemist, and it's me, Jacob, as always, here with Lenore. What's up, Lenore?
Nothing, not a whole hell of a lot. I saw my first burning car on the highway in a long while. I feel like that's kind of where we're at these days.
It's how it goes. Were you responsible for it, or?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Gotcha. Well, we are all joined by someone else who also can't confirm or deny any responsibility. This is Kennedy Cooper, political analyst from The Worst Week Yet, and they also have a show called The Most Important Election of Our Lives. Welcome to the show, Kennedy. How you doing?
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Going okay. Well, I'll say right off the top, Lenore's talking about seeing a burning car. You on the way here, you were talking about seeing floods in the roads. Give us some analysis. What does this mean?
I think if you see a flood, there's water there. I think that's what old Paulo would tell us right
That's
now.
true. Follow the water. We are talking about Paulo. You recommended this book was one of them books we were talking about. This was on kind of the list of things you were interested in. This is The Alchemist. It was a book that was on my radar, but I actually had not read till now. What makes you interested about this book? What's your background with it? Because I'll confess, I don't have any background with it, and I think Lenore, I don't think you did either, right?
None, none. I'd heard about it before, but I hadn't. This is my first brush with Coelho.
Gotcha. So, Kennedy, what's your background with the book?
Yeah, it's something that I read for the first time when I was young,
Hmm.
and it was really impactful to me then. It's a very interesting book. It has some very somewhat deep and in other ways very obvious themes.
Sure.
And I think it was a great read for a young person in the place in life that I was in. And then it's an interesting book that for me, it's definitely not a perfect book. I don't think it's perfect. I'm ready to, in fact, dig into some criticisms today, possibly, as well as some praise. But it is a book that I find myself coming back to periodically in life, and it's a reflective book. It is a book
Hmm.
that shows you yourself, I think. And I think the biggest problem with Paulo Coelho's writing is that the first book of his you read, you're like, wow, this is really good. And the second one, you're like, I guess this is okay. And by the third one, you're like, this man only can write one fucking book.
Well,
And
he's
to be
gonna.
fair, it's an all right book, but it's he cannot write anything besides just like pseudo biblical wackadoo.
Well, it's like we talked about George Saunders a couple weeks ago, and like he just kept writing short stories where people are trapped in theme parks pretending like visitors will one day come, like multiple horror stories like that. But when asked why he does it, he's like, "Well, people keep reading it. I don't know."
You realize your personal legend, and you're just kind of off to the races from there.
Guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my personal legend writes stories about people stuck in amusement parks.
That was the case. That was the case for George Saunders. Good
Mm.
book, actually. Liberation Day. Good book.
Fantastic Land. If y'all haven't read that on the subject of amusement parks, that's a really good horror novel. Like Disneyland, if it was cut off from the mainland by a hurricane, and then it becomes Lord of the Flies.
Disney. What if
Hmm.
Disney was evil? Has anyone thought of this?
Whoa.
It's a good point.
There is one man brave enough to ask this question. His name is Ron DeSantis.
He sees Mickey Mouse and he like draws the fangs. He's just like still looking to my fucked up mind,
The one man who could
My
survive
psyche.
the abandoned by Disney creepypasta.
Well, Lenore, tell us about our author because again, I just have very little background. I know you said there's some interesting stuff here, and of course, this book looms very large. So, what's the
Yeah,
deal?
it
What's going
definitely
on
has
here?
a cultural shadow.
No doubt.
Yeah, like I feel like, I'm adrift in the ocean of literature here, and I'm missing enormous icebergs. George Saunders, huge, literary titan. Hadn't ever heard of him, hadn't ever read his stuff until fairly recently. Similar for Coelho, and he's got even more of a global reach than Saunders does, as we'll see.
Well,
Um,
Lenore, you had read such masterpieces as like the Cross-Time Engineer and stuff like that. So you were spending your time sort of studying true art.
the world demands an in-depth, like 40-part podcast series on Leo Frankowski and his work. I'm telling you.
It's not going to be me, I'll tell you.
I was about to say, listen for the world demanding it. You might hear a lot of silence.
It's not my
Um,
not my my personal legend. Uh,
um, but so Paulo Coelho on the subject of personal legends. He was
yeah.
born August 24th, 1947 in Rio de Janeiro. He is Brazilian.
Okay.
Now there's stuff in his backstory that comes from interviews with him that I'm going to be taking with a grain of salt. In no small part because just like I was telling Ryan about this earlier, Jacob, just like friend of the show Yukio Mishima, Mr. Coelho claims to remember his own birth.
Okay, awesome.
I
Oh,
That's awesome
I
to have
remember my birth though.
Oh yeah?
three in a
Yeah.
row.
Yeah, real talk.
Damn,
Break it down.
we're hitting them all. We're hitting them all.
All right.
Apparently
You,
this is more
Quellu,
common
and
than I
Yukio
thought.
Mishima. The
Yeah.
only three people to do it.
He says he says I came into this world, saw an old woman, and knew that she was my grandmother. Doctors say that such things are possible.
Doctors say.
He
Fucking
talks
awesome.
like that. There's a lot of the just so. There's a lot of the parable about the way he speaks and writes. It's
Yeah.
not an uncommon entry point for people who lay claim to really deep insight into the human condition, right? Like you have
Oh, I don't have any deep insight into. I want to be clear about that one right off the bat.
no, you're still in search of it. You will find it. Coelho's in his 70s.
Well, that makes it more believable if you think about it, Kennedy. It's like somebody who's like, no, I got no insight from this shit. I just remember it happening. I don't know. It kind of sucked.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it's just a weird thing where when I was like 8 or 9, I asked my mom, I was like, "Hey, I kind of have this weird memory. Can I tell you about it?" She's like, "Yeah, sure." And I described my birth, and she's like, "What the fuck?"
Holy shit.
deeply unsettling.
Wow.
See, now you gotta write a parable now. I don't know what about, but something. Well,
It'll
you
be
can do
about
it.
a
You can
a
do it.
person who posts to Bluesky while on ketamine. A very relatable story to my own life.
Well, 5 minutes into the episode, and we're already learning like new things about how the human mind works.
Well, written in the style of like Aesop's fables about like posting skeets. Yeah.
Well, in the same interview as he says this, Coelho, the journalist writing it, claims that they took a break for some archery, and Coelho got 11 bullseyes in a row, a thing that he did not do.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna call bullshit on that one.
Okay, so this guy is self kind of he's building his own legend a little bit with
Well,
these.
I also got 11 bulls. I'm just kidding.
You got 12. No, I was there. You got 12.
I'm
Don't
just
sell yourself short.
every fact you say about him, I'm just gonna say, oh, that's me too. I did that.
Are you
God
Brazilian?
damn.
Are you live streaming from Brazil right
I'm
now?
live streaming from Brazil.
Albuquerque, Brazil.
I've from Albuquerque, Brazil. I've widely traveled the world. Yeah.
So what I think is very, very true is he goes to a Jesuit school from the age of 7, does Paulo. He wins an award at a school poetry competition during his years as a student. So from a very young age, he's into writing, and he
Sure.
decides,
That's
yeah,
believable.
yeah, and this is what I want to do with my life, is what he's thinking in his head. I don't want to be an engineer like my father. I want to be an author. So when he was 17, his parents do what any normal parents would do when their kid doesn't want to go into engineering. They institutionalize him and he's given shock treatment.
Oh my God.
He has
Because
since
he won't be an engineer?
yeah, he won't be an engineer. He's like, antisocial, like, and his parents were like, we gotta do something. It's the mid 60s. This is what you do with your delinquent child.
Gotcha.
He
That's
has
crazy.
since forgiven them. He basically says, "Look, I was right, you were wrong, but you just wanted the best for me. I make of that what you will."
I as a non-binary trans femme with transphobic parents, I kind of get it.
But
Like
also,
not deeply transphobic parents to be clear, but just, you know.
With a little bit of
Um,
that sauce in there, yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. I think you have to be willing to forgive for your own sake sometimes in this life. And
sure.
this
That's true.
sounds like maybe more of that kind of forgiveness than like, yeah, I just let you off the hook. It's all good. It sounds more like he's like, listen, I'm at peace with it. You were trying your best. It wasn't good,
Hmm.
but fuck it. It's over now. You
True.
know? And
As
I
somebody
can
who,
relate to that again, like I said.
and on the other side of things, as someone who was a creative writing major, a lot of those students deserved electric shock therapy. So, like,
You know,
not like for just like out of just the sin of choosing creative writing as a major. Me too.
Well, at the
Wait.
time, he's not nearly as at peace with it. He escapes 2 times.
Okay, cool.
He gets into acting and journalism while he's out. He's institutionalized again. Finally, he's released in 67. He's 20, and he's like, okay, no more of this. I'm going into law school.
Okay.
Um, he drops out of law
that
school.
makes sense.
He drops
That
out of
also
law
makes sense.
school. He becomes an itinerant hippie. He gets into the occult. He starts reading Aleister Crowley. He starts a zine. In 71, he falls in with rock star Raul Seixas, for whom he writes song lyrics. A couple of years later, they join the Alternative Society, which is an anarchist organization that wants to establish a commune in the state of Minas Gerais. Um,
It is interesting too, like, because it's worth noting, like, this 70's still in Brazil, right? Like, there is a military dictatorship going on, like a
there
right-wing
is indeed.
like this isn't just like some guy somewhere. Like this is it. This is pretty illegal shit to espouse these like beliefs and stuff at the time. Like,
Illegal and like high profile. Like Seixas is big in the Brazilian music scene apparently. And so when you're absolutely right, there's a military dictatorship running the country. They hear that there's this guy writing song lyrics like do what you will, that's the only law, and they're like, okay, we got to put a stop to this.
right, right. Friend of
So,
the show, Vincent Bevins, Jakarta Method talks a good amount about the dictatorship in Brazil.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So he and Seixas get arrested for subversive activity. He is brutally tortured for several days and released ultimately. So it's back to the music industry for a while, but he gives up radical politics. He works as an executive, kind of
Mm.
lays low. Now in 1986 is when his life takes a turn. He meets, again, grain of salt, he meets a mysterious stranger in a vision, and later meets him IRL in a cafe in Amsterdam. I don't think this person exists.
What did the stranger tell him? Like, what did the stranger do? Because I'm
Yeah, what is the role of the mysterious
the stranger
stranger
just like
here?
sucked him off and left, and that changed his life.
You're not far off actually. Like the stranger gives him a magic ring that he wears to this day, and
Okay.
tells him to get into writing and to go on.
How is that not far off?
Listen. He speaks in omens. He speaks in fables. Like who knows what's between the lines there.
Okay, magic
Um,
ring.
On his advice, the advice of this mystery man who may or may not exist, Coelho goes to
He exists.
Spain and he walks the 500-mile road of Santiago de Compostela, very popular pilgrimage route for Catholics. This is what inspires him to devote himself full time to writing. And this is what you notice reading his interviews. He's big on omens. He's very superstitious. He won't sit down at a dinner table with 13 people, that
Okay.
kind of thing, right? His
A
creative
lot of people he had
process
dinner with.
is, I mean, he moves in like fairly influential circles. He attends a lot of dinner parties.
Sure.
And that's his creative process, traveling, meeting people, waiting for inspiration to strike. He has also stated that since that pilgrimage, there is a sign that he looks for whenever he needs to start writing his next book. If he sees a white feather somewhere, he sits down that same day and he writes.
All right, I guess. Sure.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say to that. That's nice, I guess.
Well, there is in the Telegraph back in '05, there is an interview where his interviewer kind of like pushes back a little. He's like, okay, she's like, okay, we're in London. Surely you see pigeon feathers here all the time. And he goes, well, it's got to be in January every alternate year.
What the fuck?
Which, I mean, honestly, king shit, because like
This guy's winning me over. I like this guy.
fans of his mail him feathers all the time. So he's got to lay down like criteria.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, that's fair. Yeah, because like people would just be like, "Here's a white feather. Get inspired." Like,
You're like, yeah, you're trying to like hack getting your author to write your like a new book. That's like imagine if like someone like George R. Martin like said something like that. It would this whole home would be white feathers. You can't
Imagine if
you've got to have some stipulations.
Imagine if somebody makes an AI that you can prompt with a white feather to write Coelho stuff.
Why would
Please-
I want to imagine that?
Yeah, please don't imagine that. The following year, '87, he releases The Pilgrimage. Now, it's not his first book, right? That's Hell's Archives in '82,
Okay.
which he followed up with Practical Manual of Vampirism in '84 when he was still writing in the occult space. Well,
Presumably that book in 1984 is what overthrew the Brazilian dictatorship in 1985.
it
Yeah.
is, and he must have been embarrassed about it because he tried to get it pulled from publication. It's a
Huh.
whole thing. But The Pilgrimage is his first book
It's-
for a broader audience.
I mean, I haven't read Practical Vampirism but from what I've heard, like it is like just cringe Tumblr witchy girl shit that you should not have published as a book ever. You know?
Excellent. Oh my God.
That makes me like him though. You know what I mean? Like it's like that sucks, but also like that's something that I would have done not that long
It's
ago.
relatable.
Yeah.
More authors need to put out their embarrassing early stuff, I think. I think it'd be very encouraging.
And not stand by it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to stand by it. You're allowed to immediately disavow it.
Yes. Yeah,
Like,
you're
you have
allowed
to put it
to
out.
if you started like a podcast just like tearing your own shit apart from your perspective of now, like
Hmm.
that would-
Stephen, you have to have a long career. Like Stephen King has done that with a few of his older books where he's like, maybe I shouldn't have made a book about school shootings being cool. But like more we talked about Stephen King plenty. But you could do that. I appreciate though that he had his witchy era. That definitely fits with like what's going on here.
he's still got trappings of it, as we'll see. Like so that same year, '87, he writes The Alchemist. The
Okay.
Pilgrimage comes out, it's a minor success. The Alchemist, it only takes him 2 weeks to write this. He said the book was already written in his soul, basically.
Okay, is
Um,
that I'm sorry, just is that one of those things that we're fact checking, or is there like evidence behind that? Because 2 weeks is really fucking fast to write a
Well,
book.
because the way that he pitches it, right? He pays attention to his environment, to the people he meets. He incorporates elements of these things into the book. Like Alchemist in particular, he himself admits, yeah, that a lot of this is very autobiographical.
That it really happened to him?
In the sense of there's a boy who does something different from his father and goes on an adventure, works an honest job, goes back to his personal legend, you know?
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
so.
There's just elements that are like mirroring his life and stuff. And I just want to say, now I don't believe that he had a vision of this man in advance, but I actually believe in the man in Amsterdam, and let me tell you why.
Go
Mhm.
for it.
Because I have lived in Asheville, North Carolina. All right, and I suspect Amsterdam has this same kooky vibe from what I've heard about it. But in Asheville, North Carolina, you could totally just wander into a coffee shop and meet a guy who would be like, "Here's a magic ring. I've got the answers for..." Like, that's actually so believable as like a life event. It's just like man, you met like a grifting heroin addict, not like a seer. You know what I'm saying? Like you did not meet the prophet. You met some guy who was just like probably fucking on like a 6 day LSD binge or something. It was just like, here, man, have this magic ring. What, you like to write books? You gotta write books, dude. Like, and that's the other
If
thing,
that
right?
pushed
Is
him
like,
forward.
I believe that if there's anything that he's leaving out of his stories about himself, it's those leading moments, those leading, you know what I mean? Like, he's just so focused on the myth that he forgets to say, "Oh, well, I mentioned to this guy, I write books." Right?
Right.
And instead makes it sound like this guy just said, "You must write." Like it was just like you didn't even, but it's like I
He
don't believe
prompted it.
that part. That's where my like I believe that he met a guy in Amsterdam who gave him a ring and was all whacked out and spooky back in the day? Actually, yes. But
Why
it's
not?
it's the it's the other parts, the vision, the
I mean,
Construct the
do
lore around it.
do seers know that they're seers at the time they're seeing, you know?
Lenore, do you recall that one time we were doing that rent control petition and that guy in the Kroger parking lot was talking about being a wizard?
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
we've had a similar experience where the guy was like, "We have to confront the rich, and then their true masters will reveal themselves," very confidently. Which I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "We all know what's really up in Alaska," and I really wish I had interrogated further because I want to know. But it's true, I've never
Yeah,
been
I
there.
don't know what's really up in Alaska. Wait, tell me more.
Well, this
Does
old man was very confident about it. He signed a petition though.
does anybody really know what's up in Alaska?
I guess
No.
we'll have to cover a book about it, maybe looking for Alaska.
We'll have to hire a necromancer so we can talk to my great aunt Charlotte.
I don't really want to do John Green. If we do John Green, I'm not doing Looking for Alaska. Whatever. On we go. I'm sorry. I'm
On
gonna make this into the longest bio of all time by riffing on you here, Lenore. Sorry.
no. There's longer ones. Go back through our catalog.
The
The archetype.
Tolkien one was actually an hour long.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot to talk about. So like the archetype of the alchemist, right? A guy leaves his home to search for treasure, realizes it's in his home the entire time. This is not new, right? It's based on a story. The structure is like from the Thousand and One Nights,
Yeah.
which itself was adapted by Jorge Luis Borges. That version Coelho read when he was young, and so he's kind of riffing on that.
Well, and the book
Um,
even references A Thousand and One Nights. So,
oh yeah,
it's,
Yeah.
it's self-referential there.
oh yeah. It's self-referential, and on release, it flops big
Mm,
time. It sells 900 copies. His publishing house does not reprint it. They dump him.
shit.
So he goes to a bigger publishing house, and he writes another book, Brida, in 1990. I don't know if it's been translated into English to this day, but they reprint his other books too, and that is when The Alchemist takes off. It's a big hit in France in the early 90s. From there, it sells like crazy throughout the rest of the world. And to this day, now he's become a literary titan on the scale of Patterson, King. He's bigger than Crichton. He's been called the best-selling writer in the Portuguese language.
Oh,
Sales
wow.
figures for his entire body of work are surprisingly murky. Major publications seem to have stopped counting in 2016 at 350 million books.
Jesus.
Uh, not
That's a lot.
it's oh yeah. Like not counting explicitly religious or political texts like the Bible or the Quran or quotations from Chairman Mao. There are 8 books that have sold over 100 million copies. The Alchemist is number 3 on that list. 150 million copies, 170 countries. He holds the world record for most translated book by a single author into over 80 languages. The
Wow.
Alchemist has been translated.
Wow.
It's been adapted into comics in France. It's on the stage in Britain and India. Jacob, I sent you that Singaporean rock band that wrote a song about it. There's a
Mhm.
manga adaptation that dropped in November. Like, it's
There's a movie that's like been in the works for like 10 years and that keeps falling through, but like apparently is really like maybe gonna be a thing soon.
perhaps, yeah, Lawrence Fishburne was attached to it at one point, but that was a while back. He would have played the Alchemist.
He would have played the boy. He was playing him as like just a like Lawrence Fishburne at his current age.
Hey, you can age anybody up or down these
What if they
days.
did a role like a age reversed version of the Alchemist? The boy as the oldest character, the crystal shop owner as the youngest character, probably.
Just do,
Everybody, all the like warlords are like tweens, I guess.
I mean, historically, there was a lot of that.
That's true.
Mehmet II was like 19 when he conquered Constantinople.
You should put 19-year-olds in charge of shit like that. I was wilding at 19.
It's
I
Hey,
not
was
gonna
he,
get
out of
worse.
control. Now I'm sleepy, I'm achy. The listeners at home don't know this, but I'm just rubbing my shoulder most of the show. My shoulder is fucked up. I'm old. Um,
you got to get it out before you're like late 20s, and then you're just cooked.
yeah, you cooked after that.
I don't feel like conquering cities these days.
I'm
Um,
27, so I still can.
For
I
like
still can.
2 more days. Enjoy it.
Too close.
Now, Coelho's been asked about the broad appeal of his books because they're enormously successful across like a wide range of religions, cultures, like all that. And his response is, I don't know. I write about things that are provoking me in the moment, he says. I write to understand myself, what's going through my head. Probably the day that I learn the secret, he says, I'll lose that spontaneity and my books will just be products. They'll be totally meaningless to me.
Well, it's like so many figures, especially the Alchemist. Like you've got like Bill Clinton likes this book. Like just like random ass people like this book.
Clinton likes it. It's one of Madonna's favorite books. Putin likes it. Pinochet was a Coelho fan,
Wait, for
apparently.
real?
Pinochet, like in his office, like was found like after he died, I think a whole bunch of Coelho
His
novels.
his personal legend. Holy shit.
His personal legend is inviting a whole bunch of Chicago school ghouls to ruin Chile's economy.
Something like that. Holy cow. That's a wild range. And I mean, obviously just a lot of normal people too. Um, I feel like I'm sorry, I'll let you finish the bio before I like start to like throw out prognostications on why.
He goes on to talk about that like what he writes about is I mentioned that he hasn't really like shed all of his esotericism. He himself doesn't really think of his books as esoteric. He says like I write about sex, prostitution, craziness, the common denominator, the essence of life. We live in a time when we don't just focus on fulfilling our obligations, retiring and dying, but rather we look for more. I only provoke people to think about things for the super rich as well as a small-time taxi driver. Um,
Hmm.
he's not a critical darling, but his opinion is, look, say what you want about my books, don't bring the readers into it. Whatever they take from my books is valid. He's a devout Catholic, though of a more progressive stripe. He really didn't like Benedict the 16th. He said, "I'm not going to defend a pope that's against condoms, pope that still thinks we're in medieval times, and honestly based." He's a big philanthropist. He opened a school in Rio that provides education to poor children. He's a messenger of peace for the UN. He's got 100, like over 100 awards, honorary titles from around the world. I mentioned that he moves in some fairly influential circles, namely Davos. Uh,
Oh shit.
he's a frequent guest
Far
at
away from the anarchist punk scene
well,
in
yeah,
Brazil.
it was really weird to me. Like he's a frequent guest of the World Economic Forum because he likes that it's a neutral territory for powerful people to talk. So he's got a fairly idealistic reading of it. Um,
Well, I'm not shocked that he has like an idealistic view of the world. I picked up on that one.
yeah, like well, and it's not that he's totally uncritical. Like he says that yeah, American politicians who go to Davos, he's spoken to them about pushing for peace in Southwest Asia and the Middle East. They don't listen to him. Like he said a while back, I look upon America as a corporation in which I would not buy any shares.
Got our ass.
Yeah.
He cooked us for
That's
real.
pretty fucking fair. And I mean, I don't know, like I'm not trying to completely defend this guy by any means, but I do think like if you have the opportunity to speak to the world's powerful people and maybe influence them, and he's like legitimately calling for like peace in the Middle East and stuff like that at Davos, he might be the only person doing that there, you know?
That could very
Fair
well
enough.
be.
He's the
Uh,
guy from like Ministry for the Future that holds up Davos at that one part. What I am curious, like his politics, like what does he have like a any ideology we can like identify at this point, or is that kind of obscured? I mean, obviously he's not like a conservative, but
Yeah, the impression that I get is that he's kind of a he's a left enough lib, I think. Like I
okay,
remember him he was very anti-Bolsonaro when that guy came to power in Brazil. He wrote an article comparing what Bolsonaro was calling for to like the military dictatorship and the torture that he went through. He's like, yeah, this is the sort of shit that Bolsonaro supports and we should fight it. But yeah, like this it seems to me, as I was saying earlier, Jacob, it seems to me that you get Paulo Coelho when a hippie strikes gold, right?
hmm.
You know, he's doing as
Yeah.
best as he believes he can in the circles that he has access to.
I
But
was gonna
large
say he basically sounds like he has been in Jerry politics, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I can get behind this guy. I like this guy. I can hang with him.
He's okay. I think he gets too much of a harsh rap sometimes. I,
Hmm.
I think a lot of people just, they look at his success, they look at the fact that his books are very popular and just all
Mhm.
right, and on some levels, at least. I mix again. There's some. I think The Alchemist is great in some ways and just fine in other ways, but I think that like he gets a lot of flack for being a popular author who writes stuff that's just all right, but that's most popular authors,
That's
right?
true.
Like Dan Brown writes stuff that's just all right. You
Yeah.
Yeah,
know?
no doubt.
um
No, Da Vinci Code is a slog. Are you kidding me? No doubt.
yeah. And I think by comparison to that, I don't know, I think he's trying to say something about things that matters. I think like there's things that you can say that are positive about his works that you can't say about every very popular author. And I think so. I don't know. I think a lot of people just kind of like they take like an overly critical look at him when it's like, he clearly never expected to be this successful,
Sure.
has given away a reasonable amount of the money he's made.
Mhm.
Like he's not, and he's just, I don't know, it just seems like he's just doing his best to do what he can with whatever influence he has. And he probably recognizes that even with his millions of dollars and tons of fame, that's actually not much,
Hmm.
Mhm.
power. Which like I think that's another thing that like, speaking as somebody with like a small but bigger than most people following on social media, a lot of people will look at that number next to my name and think that that represents some kind of power. And I think that some of the people that are overly critical of our friend Paulo here, look at these awards next to his name and these dollar figures next to his name and assume that represents some kind of power,
Sure.
but it probably doesn't
Hmm.
represent much power. Like he was able to found a school. That's pretty
Mhm.
cool. That's also not that impressive when you really think about it.
In the
Like,
grand scheme of things, yeah.
yeah,
Compared
like in
to,
the right.
well, yeah,
Compared to
the
what
fact that like
Pinochet did.
Pinochet read his book doesn't mean he can tell Pinochet what to do,
Right.
or
Right,
Clinton or
right.
any of these people.
Yeah, exactly. Just because Bill Clinton's a fan doesn't mean that Bill Clinton would take one piece of advice from this
I
guy.
think Bill Clinton's reading this and he's like,
I
my
mean,
personal legend is to end the welfare state.
Bill
I mean,
Clinton's just reading it
Obama's.
for the casual misogyny.
Yeah,
I mean, one of
true.
Obama's favorite books was Liberation Day. I mean, but again, I think Kennedy,
Ministry
you're,
for the future.
yeah, no, legit, legit, and yeah, Kennedy, I think you're absolutely right. There is a tendency to, anybody with enormous stature to, not unlike the way that some of his books are read by certain critics, right? I think there's a tendency to look at these things and overlay what you intend them to be, onto the text or onto the person itself, and then judge them according to that. And that's not necessarily what he's going for.
Lenore,
Yeah.
did you have a quote from him you wanted to read that was pretty good?
This entertained me. This was
Ooh,
incredible.
okay.
So on his blog, paulocoelhoblog.com, there's an article from 2022 called Ninja Training. It's very short. I can throw it out here. This is from his book Manual of the Warrior of the Light. There's a picture of a ninja, and just a dude in like head to toe black, and then below it these sentences. The ninja warriors go to the field where some wheat has just been planted. Obeying the trainer's command, they jump over the places where the seeds were sown. Every day the ninja warriors return to the field. The seeds turn into buds, and the warriors jump over them. The buds turn into small plants. The warriors jump over them. They do not become bored. They do not feel it as a waste of time. The wheat grows and the jumps become higher and higher. In this way, when the plant is ripe, the ninja warriors still manage to jump over it. Why? As a result of their jumping over, what many may have seen as insignificant has allowed them to be keenly aware of their obstacles. And I think, you know what? It's every so often, if you feel stuck, you just need something like that. It's very easy it's very easy to be like, oh man, I'm stuck. What I'm doing is a waste of my time. What am I even doing with myself? And to have a sincere to have a sincere parable of, look, it's you're going up a long set of stairs, and it's just one step at a time. There is, I think, space for that, and there is, I think, necessity for that. And to have a guy like Coelho saying, yeah, just keep going, there is value in that.
I think there is also like I mean I've said it before, but there is something to like a lot a lot of what we want out of fiction often can be like a motivational poster, but written in such a way that we can like intellectualize it and enjoy it. And
Right.
I don't mean that as
Right.
like an insult. Like,
No, no, no.
I've heard people describe some of this stuff as like live, laugh, love, and there's like almost something to that, but also like put in such a way that we can then like digest it and actually like take the message away. There's something to that. But we can I want to make sure we, talk about the book here. And I want to say right at the top of this book, in the version I read, the 10 years on, him summarizing the book afterwards, he quotes Oscar Wilde. And like Lenore, we cannot get away from this guy.
We did a lot of that this month.
We cannot get away from Oscar Wilde, no matter what. He follows us everywhere, which like I'm not
Wild
complaining
season.
about. It could be a worse author to be like following us around, but the ghost
Yukio
of Oscar
Mishima
Wilde.
following us around.
My God. Hey, look, next to me, I was gonna say Kenny was talking about earlier giving Quellu some grace. I agree, and that may just be because like I'm comparing him to last week's author who like did try to overthrow the Japanese government to like reinstate fascism, but
Yeah,
like
this
in a
guy
funny
just
way.
wrote some books. Some people act like he's evil. All he did was just write some nice words about some stories where people overcame adversity and stuff like that. And when you hear his story, it shouldn't be that surprising that he's a little hung up on that concept. You
100%.
know, like I just don't think people should be shocked by that. And again, I don't think these books are perfect or the deepest things ever necessarily, the stuff that he writes, but I think the issue is in looking at it either way. I think the people that read The Alchemist and go, this is the deepest book ever. Yes, they are annoying, and I understand why people are annoyed by them and why they go, oh, this is the live, laugh, love of philosophy books or whatever. But then on the other hand, I feel like people, the cynical people, they go into it looking, they're like, well, this will be the new, this will be like reading Young for the first time, or something. And it's like, no, dog, this is like reading like a really good YA novel with some philosophy sprinkled in. But
Mhm.
that said, like again, it is very motivational, and I think that aspect of it is truly special. It's something that, like I said, it had a big impact on me when I was young. Read it when I was young, and I was blown away by it. And I found, especially as a young person, I found the twists and turns of the novel to be very exciting and hard
Sure.
to predict. As an older person rereading it, of course, I've read it before. But even if I hadn't, I feel like, some of the tropes would have, I would have picked up on some of that stuff more quickly. But I
Hmm.
will still say, like, I reread this book most recently when I was getting out of like, at least in full. I reread parts of it periodically and also just listen to parts of it periodically when I'm having trouble falling asleep. I find the audiobook so soothing.
The Jeremy Irons audiobook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ridiculously good audiobook.
Mhm.
Um, so sometimes when I'm just really having insomnia, I will throw on a couple chapters of The Alchemist.
Hell yeah.
Well,
Puts me right
Kennedy,
out.
will you basically give us just sort of what is this book? What's the general premise of this book? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a book about a young man. He has a vision first. He's a shepherd, and he's just kind of living the lifestyle of his family and his forebearers, so to speak. And is he travels around with his sheep, selling, wool and stuff,
As
and
one does.
as one does if you have sheep. And but he starts to have this itch. Maybe there could be something more for him because of this vision that he has. And then after the vision, he runs into this king from the Bible
He's just chilling.
who's just chilling. And this mythical king tells him, "Hey man, you got to go find a treasure. It's in Egypt. You got to get the fuck out of here. You're in the wrong place, buddy."
You're in Spain right now.
You're in,
You got to go south.
yeah.
Go south, young man.
And the boy's a little conflicted about this at first, but he decides he has to just, give it a shot. What the heck? He sells a sheep. He takes off. He gets robbed immediately of all of his money. Um, so he gets a job at a crystal glass shop. He's really good at helping this motherfucker boost sales. He's working for this old dusty dude that has not ever heard of the idea of customer satisfaction. Um, and uh, and he comes in there and helps this guy out. And this is one of my favorite parts too, because this guy has his whole life wanted to take a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
He's a devout Muslim, and you're supposed to take a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in your life as a part of your faith. So there's this interesting interplay between the boy who is determined to seek his personal legend and this man who's kind of made peace with not necessarily ever going to Mecca. And so I really like that part of it. Then the boy travels on. He travels through the desert. It's quite harrowing at times. Um, he meets the Englishman, another really interesting character that I think the Englishman is somebody that we all as white leftists have to just have some humility and see ourselves in. Um,
Yup.
you know, I just think like if you can't read it that way, you may not be getting everything that you could possibly get out of this
Sure.
book.
The sort of person who crosses the desert with a camel full of books. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean I'm sorry, y'all, but that is white leftism. We do have a
I
problem.
I would simply have a
And
Kindle about it, but his theme seems like a lot.
and especially once the boy does meet the alchemist in the desert,
Mm-hmm.
the alchemist basically tells him the Englishman's got to figure this out a lifetime from now.
Mm-hmm. He's got some work to do.
you know, or that at least that it's indeterminate how long. That the Englishman is not there yet, and that his academic colonialist way of looking at things is not ever gonna cut it. It's just very clearly the vibes that are being laid down. So I think even if this book isn't like explicitly leftist, there is a small thread of leftism that you can
Sure.
tease out of it, in that way, especially. The boy learns a lot from the alchemist, travels with him for a while. Again, some of the travel's a little harrowing. There's all these wars in the desert. There's all this shit going on. The boy, oh, I forgot to mention, he also meets uh, 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 his love. And that almost derails him from his quest. But then he decides that he has to continue on and that she'll understand, and that in fact he'll become resentful and she'll be disappointed in him and stuff if he stays and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
ever do this. An interesting thing. Uh, he finally makes it to Egypt. He wanders around there for a bit. He goes seeking his treasure. He gets the shit beaten out of him by some goons while he's looking for the treasure. He never finds the fucking treasure. And then he meets this guy who's like, "Man, I always dream of this old church in, I think, Spain, and there's like a treasure there. And this is the church where the boy used to always fucking vibe out back in the day."
Turns out the treasure was just there.
Dun 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 dun. It's the parable that we talked about. It's the
Mm-hmm.
you know and
What I like is that it is like the treasure was the friends we made along the way, but like he does actually get a chest of gold coins too. They're like, it would be mean if he didn't get something after. I appreciate that.
yeah.
It's not just a treasure. The treasure is not just like a mirror.
Well, and even deeper than the friends we made along the way, the treasure is the experiences and the growth and
Yes.
the things that you
Yes.
learn. And I think that is something that even if some of it is a little bit thin philosophically, but again, I think people just, if you go into it thinking this is the next great philosophical text, then you're going to come out of it going, "Ha, that was for peons." But if you just go into it thinking, I just want like a nice little story,
Mhm.
and then you come
Yeah.
out and you probably think, I could be better about doing my laundry or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's
Like
shows that there's like a commonness in things, right? Like, to take it back, early in the book, he's trying to figure out this vision he had, and he meets this old man who's wearing a fucking gilded breastplate underneath the cloak, if you like look close enough, and it's Melchizedek from the Bible. Just this like random king that's just from Genesis who was nice to Abraham before he was even named Abraham. Uh, Randomly beefed with the king of Sodom and then just like pieced out after giving away a tenth of his stuff to God. And I guess he just got immortality in this world. Who knows? But Melchizedek in this book is like looking at the boy is just kind of thumbing through a novel. And Melchizedek's like, this is an important book, but it's really irritating. And the boy's like, what are you talking about? And he said, it's a book that says the same thing almost all the other books in the world say, continued the old man. It describes people's inability to choose their own personal legends. And in my copy, personal legends is capitalized.
Hmm.
And it ends up saying that everyone believes the world's greatest lie. What's the world's greatest lie? The boy asked, completely surprised. It's this, that at a certain point in our lives, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. That's the world's greatest lie. That's never happened to me, the boy said, which I appreciate. There's some funny stuff in this book. I like some of
Some very
the
funny stuff.
dialogue, but it's this idea is like I like it from this like almost get go right here of him like kind of acknowledging the simplicity of the message, not the lack of profundity, but the simplicity of the message of being like, well,
yeah.
this is the book saying the things that most books are trying to say, right? We're all kind of trying to get at this shit about our personal legend, about our own quest, about where we're supposed to be headed. And I appreciate that. There's something very I mean there's something it's great that he's acknowledging that this book is kind of chasing after what a lot of things are chasing after and maybe being a little more honest about it.
Yeah. And I think also it's just a thing where you have people looking at it in this very basic sense instead of looking at things like how you're presenting this quote right now of like, I think a lot of people look at this and they say, well, okay, well, I guess if you didn't get rich when you were young, then fuck you, I guess. Like
Right.
that's not the message of this book, you know?
Sure.
The message of the book is, if anything, just like, if you're at any stage in your life and you feel that you're not living for your dreams or your best life, you could just, stop what you're doing and go do that. And I think that's a powerful message that I think really I see people resist this sort of message a lot, not just from this book, but in general. In terms of like I mean like right now during the early stages of the Trump presidency, I have a lot of friends that are considering getting out of red states and going to safer states and things like that. But for every one of them that's like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna do it. I've been thinking about this anyway. It's just time. It's over. There will be one that's like, well, I just can't. And then you hear their reasons, and usually nine times now there's that 10th person who's like, I can't because, and then they give you something really good and you're like, oh fuck, that's fucked, you are screwed,
Hmm.
but 9 times out of 10 most people are just like, well, I don't know how I downsize my possessions,
Sure.
or or I don't have a driver's license. They have some really basic like blockade, and it just stops there. The question of something like that. Now listen, now I'm not saying that everyone needs to flee the places that they're in necessarily. That's not the message I want anybody to take away from what I'm saying right now. What I'm saying though is that, there are people that want to leave the places that they're in right now in this current historic moment. Should not be a shocking fact, right? But then, like I said, a large number of them feel blocked by things that, again, it's like that quote of like they feel like fate is in control of their life now,
Hmm.
not
Mm.
themselves. And
Well, I
I
think what part
do.
of what you're saying is that like if you think you should leave, I mean, first you should definitely dig a hole and make sure you're not standing on top of like a pile of gold. But then, yeah, uh, uh, I mean, there's something there too, right? But like, absolutely. It's like, what do you call it? You have agency. That's the word I'm looking for. That's the word that came to mind. Like, we have agency. We can choose to be told we don't have it, but we do. I want to read one more quote here from the old man, the king of Salem. He says, "Why are you talking to a shepherd?" The boy asked, and he says, for several reasons. But let's say the most important is that you have succeeded in discovering your personal legend. The boy didn't know what a personal legend was. It's what you have always wanted to accomplish. Everyone, when they are young, knows what their personal legend is. At that point in their lives, everything is clear and everything is possible. They are not afraid to dream and to yearn for everything they would like to see happen to them in their lives. But as time passes, a mysterious force begins to convince them that it will be impossible for them to realize their personal legend. And then the boy is immediately like, hmm, well, I don't know what this mysterious force is, but I bet you the merchant's daughter will be hella impressed when I tell her about it.
Well, that's and that's the thing, right? It's even if you haven't decided on a course of action, right? Even if you have this or that or the other thing saying, nah, keep your head down, stay in your lane. Like, what's important is that there is that sense that you could be doing something more. There is that sense that you could be moving somehow and you just haven't made the decision yet. For now, his motivation is going back to see the merchant's daughter, but it could very well be something different, right? The question that he's asked at one point, the first time that he meets this person, is, if you know how to read, why are you just a shepherd?
Mhm.
And it's not a malicious question. Like, you're not being maligned by this person saying, hey, you don't seem like the average shepherd. But he's not yet at a point in his life where he's like, well, I could be something more.
Tell me
Um,
this though. What do you think about either of you think about the fact that like it says everyone from a young age knows their personal legend and then they forget it. What do y'all think about that aspect of it?
I mean, I think you just get tied down, honestly. I mean, he could, and there are many points during the story where he could allow himself to be tied down and be perfectly fine, right? He makes
Right.
he makes his money back, like, several times throughout the story,
He's
as
a
early as
hustler,
going to the
no
crystal
doubt.
shop.
He's a young money hustler, no doubt.
Mm,
But like the deeper truth in that, is there a deeper truth to everybody knows their legend from a young age?
I think there is, in the sense, I think you have to read it as poetry. I think if you
Yeah.
take it a little too literally,
yeah.
Yeah, well,
like,
it's not theory. Yeah, no doubt.
I think I like, again, back to like the criticisms of this book. If you did take that line a little too literally, you might be disappointed. But I think if you think of it more in the sense of, like, I mean, we have statistics that show us that creativity gets beaten out of us
Sure.
on average in school, and that often creative people, as young adults, have to relearn creative skills and things like that, is like a common, this is something that there's science and math behind what I'm saying here,
Right, right.
you know? And so, like, I think, like, the idea that, like, when we're young, to put it less poetically, when we're young, we're very creative and we're full of big ideas, and then we get that beaten out of us, and sometimes we stop dreaming entirely. I think if you phrase it more like that, well, now it's a sentence I 100% agree with. And I think, I mean, first of all, this is a book that's been translated multiple times and stuff like that. If you're taking every single word ultra literally, you're probably not getting anything from this, right?
Sure, no doubt.
You
There's a
know?
really there's a really caustic joke that, like, Portuguese language critics tell, which is like, oh well, the translation probably improves the prose.
Dang.
Yeah, it's
Well,
Yeah,
pretty.
and there's been jokes about this very book about that.
well, what I'll say is,
So,
for me, one thing I took away from this, again, not reading it hyper literally, but I thought of like when I was like 6 or 7, I knew I had crushes on guys, and then I unlearned that, right? And then I
right.
had to relearn it again as an adult, right? Like I had to like re-piece together that thing that was intuitive and that was like kind of beaten out of me by like culture and religion and
Oh, I
whatnot,
mean,
right?
same
So,
same basic, like, I
Yeah.
remember vividly periods where I told people I was very close to, yeah, maybe I should give being a girl a try, and then I just proceeded not to think about that for another decade.
yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah,
So there's something to that.
I had a lot of similar experiences when I was young, and not just with gender and sexuality, although definitely those things. Um, because, I mean, like, for me, my gender identity has always felt natural since I was very young, and then it was sort of like, no, no, don't be like that, you know?
Mm.
Right? And so I think that also can be kind of like that, but also just in terms of, like, I felt like there was a lot of pressure when I was young, to, like, sort of choose a real career path, even though, like, I was really interested in the arts.
Hmm.
and passionate about that. And so, and now I'm in this interesting position in my life where by leaning back into video stuff, filming things,
Yeah.
editing things, writing scripts. I do this for multiple political organizations around the country. None that are super huge, although
Mhm.
I will name drop that the biggest org I've worked with is Until There's a Cure. So like, I do
Hmm.
occasionally work with somebody that's notable, but
Oh yeah.
mostly it's stuff that you wouldn't have heard of, and that's okay. I don't mind, but because that's not really what it's about. But the point that I'm making is just that, by returning to the things that I've always been most passionate about, I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was a kid. I would take, a shitty camcorder and record Legos, like stop motion movies. I would
Hell
edit
yeah.
that
Oh hell
shit
yeah.
in the camera because I had no other choice.
Oh my God.
You
Just
know?
little by little, huh?
Yeah, just little by little. And then the craziest part, I was super poor growing up, okay?
Hmm.
So, the fact that I even had access to this camcorder was a big deal. Tapes were very expensive, so I would literally finish a project, show it to my friends and family, and then erase it and start over because I
Wow.
did not
Wow.
have an unlimited number of fucking tapes, especially like camcorder tapes. These were not like, you know, this was not like a regular VHS tape that was like $8 back in the day.
Sure.
These were like $35 in the 90s,
Yeah, they add
you
up.
know? um,
I think there too is like,
um,
well, I think the book like also kind of makes that point too. I mean, you're talking about it doesn't have to be like a grand legend in the sense of you find a chest of gold and what all this shit turn into wind. I mean, like they've literally got a guy he comes across who like is like a baker and like candy maker or something along those lines, and his legend is to do that, and he's like living that in a very like profound way at one point in
yeah,
his
yeah,
book.
yeah.
I
And
also think there is something to like say one more thing about the we know our legends and then forget it. I think that, again, I don't know what he's saying politically here, but what I could can also take from this like politically is it's like there is also an inborn thing, right? Into young people or politically maybe naive people, but that are really just not giving it much thought and haven't had ideology beaten to them to be like, well, yeah, of course, like my belief is that everybody should have a house, right? Of course everybody should have like that's actually like a thing people have pretty like naturally, I think, and it has to kind of they have to have like that unlearn that shit through, capitalist mechanisms of like misleading people. So there's also like that side of things too. That I won't
yeah,
even say
yeah.
goodness, but that like altruistic kind of just like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, and
Uh
you can have you can have that absolute certainty at that young age, yes, that this is what your personal legend is. And you can also have it, it's also like fairly, I mean, as passionate as one can be in like youthful naivete, they can also be like fairly adrift and like insecure in it, right? Like the way when when the kid talks to the girl that he likes, right? And he's just telling her what he's read in books as if it's his own experience, right? He's also it's also a lack of experience that leaves him susceptible to, the old man, Melchizedek, telling him that the book he's reading is irritating because he's like, oh, well, maybe I should toss it and get a better book, right? He
mm,
hasn't
Yeah, yeah.
really as much pride as he takes in wandering and being a shepherd, as much as he feels like he is in the lane that he should be in, there is also that part of him that's still like, well, maybe I can do something different. And more to the point, maybe I should be doing something different because he hasn't truly settled into it in the way that he thinks that he has.
But of course, doing something different doesn't fully work out for him in the way he thinks because he gets fucking robbed the second he steps foot on the other shore and has to work in a crystal shop. And I mean, we talked about that a bit. Kennedy talked about that. It's the old man who wants to see Mecca, and even when he has the money to, he's like, well, I've already like lived this in my brain, and I can't really properly experience this. Like, and it's pretty sad for sure. But it's also there's this interesting feature here where it's the only time this happens, but Melchizedek gave the boy a white and black stone to like to
Hmm.
basically be like a true and false type thing. And these stones give him sort of one kind of give him a nudge in the right direction here early on. But then he just like kind of has them as security going forward, like feeling like, okay, I've got this thing I can fall back on if I need it, even though he like typically doesn't. But I find like, he spends his time in the city and he spends his time basically selling people on customer service, talking about, well, what if we advertise and if we like sell tea, people will want to buy these crystal glasses. And the old man's like, shit, then I have to actually like run my business and that sounds stressful or whatever. But I guess. Um, he also at this point starts getting into the actual like alchemy side of things by learning this universal language. He realizes from his sheep, he learned to communicate with the sheep without knowing the language of sheep. And he's kind of every now and then can communicate with people in Arabic before he's even fully learned Arabic. He's kind of just got this universal language that he ends up kind of realizing as the core of alchemy. And this is the bit of it that feels very Siddhartha, which is, a story about, one of the legends of like a man becoming a Buddha, of basically transcending and reaching enlightenment through very simple work like paddling on a rowboat and things like that. And just like through experience coming to speak the language of all things around him. I kept thinking about Siddhartha reading this book every time the alchemy bits came up.
That's really interesting. I think that there are some really interesting comparisons one can make to some of the aspects of this book. And something that comes up for me that I think is a little more unusual is have either of you read Dubliners by James Joyce, the collection of short stories?
May have read some stuff from there. I'm not sure. I've read some Joyce and I'm not sure what.
Uh,
Way back in school, I took like one Irish literature class.
I really like Dubliners because it's like fairly digestible compared to a lot of other Joyce stuff because it is short stories. So
Hmm.
even though they're still fairly dense, they're only like 12 pages, and so you can take some time to digest that 12 pages or whatever, you know?
No
Um,
doubt. Yeah.
whereas like trying to read Ulysses defeated me.
Hmm.
Uh, 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 there's one story in Dubliners in particular about this guy who like he wants to write poetry, but he's just like working a menial job, and he like keeps imagining people writing glowing reviews for his poems. Like the big part of the story is him imagining these glowing reviews for his poems, but he's never written any. And I feel like there's like an aspect of this story that reminds me of that,
Hmm.
of the like, how do we achieve our dreams kind of questioning. Because the boy does not simply set out on a quest and everything goes his way as we're describing here. And I just think that like obviously this story in Dubliners is more cynical, but there's still something to this. Like there's a connection between these things for me of like, how do we achieve our dreams and stuff and questions like that. And yeah, like I think that there is like I don't know, there is some spiritual aspect to some of those questions. I'm not a particularly spiritual person in a lot of ways. So when I say it's a spiritual question, I don't necessarily mean like it's religious per se, but I
Yeah.
mean that it is a question that begs for answers that are bigger than ourselves, bigger than our communities, bigger than, the stuff that we have in front of us.
Well, he has to travel forward, right? And like he's on the caravan and they're interacting with other caravans and they manage to have the things the other ones need, right? Um,
Yeah.
but there is also an element of it that, obviously I won't basically a parable, but it is a recurring theme that if you are chasing your personal legend, the world will kind of help you along towards the worst personal legend in a sort of magical realism type of way, which I find interesting. And that is something that when I was reading reviews of this, that there was again, it was a kind of an unnecessary hater energy to me that some people were like, "Well, that's not how the world works," and it's like, "Well, yeah, fucking duh. Obviously, that's not how the
Yeah.
world works." It really felt like both. I honestly got an I'll just say this is my take on it. There were like two camps of interviews I read on this that like most of them annoyed me. The critical ones were annoying for that reason because it's like, yeah,
Yes.
obviously you can't turn into the wind. I fucking know. And then the other side of it that was like, this is, all truth in this. I read a guy who said like we shouldn't have the Bible or the Quran. We should just have this book. And I'm like, all right, slow down. You know what I
Calm the
mean?
fuck down.
Right? But like it is really nice. I don't know. That's what I keep coming back to. I'm like, this is quite pleasant. But what I am finding here is I am also seeing though why it has this broad cross appeal, which I find very interesting. Because while like the text of this book, as like the listeners can no doubt tell, is not like super dense with stuff. Like it's not like we're like talking through all these different crazy plot threads and shit. Like some of the other books we've done, it's because there's not that much of it. It's a pretty general vibe. Kennedy summed it up very easily at the beginning there. And I find it very interesting. The thing maybe most interesting about this book for me, aside from like me having a pleasant time reading it, is what kind of cross appeal it was able to have among such a wide variety of people. Like he said himself, from cab drivers to like, fucking Bill Clinton and Putin. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that this idea of like personal legend and this idea of the world is going to kind of push you along in the right direction. I think part of that is how that appeal is able to be structured. And Lenore, you mentioned something about tarot, and I wanted to know if you could like flesh that out a little bit because I thought you nailed it with that.
It's not super fleshy, but I mean, it's the
It's a little fleshy.
well, it's the
Not the
same.
substance, but
I mean, it's the same
Is
basic
the flesh
principle
tender?
to
Tender is the
to
flesh.
ooh ooh my
Our best episode. Go back and listen to it. It's good.
oh
Good.
we cooked, as
As they did the humans in that very book.
indeed. But yeah, the it's the same basic principle to my mind. Like, tarot is not explicitly magical, of course, but like it's a
Wait, you're telling me this for the first time.
but it's not explicitly magical. It's not like very rigid in its meaning. It's a method, it's a medium for getting you out of your own head and to
Yeah.
examine your conditions from a different perspective, literally. And that's what I find is a particular strength of this book. It's much more of a fable, much more of a parable than your average novel. There's less of the character work about it than it is about the situations and about navigating them, right? And the I see as you were saying, I had a similar experience, right? I see criticisms of this book being like, well, this kid just sails through it and it works out for him. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because like he gets robbed at one point, he gets beaten the shit out of by thieves toward the end, right? He
the
almost gets
whole
killed in the
desert
middle of a
arc.
war.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
say, like they keep having to stop the journey because of these conflicts going on, and then like the conflicts start to get closer, and then they're happening next door, and the boy is no longer sure if he's going to live or die, at certain points in this. And the alchemist even tells him at that one point, like, if you're still alive tomorrow, come find me.
A
If you're
dude gets hanged at one point. Yeah. And
He
that's the
falls for a baddie that he can't be with until he's found treasure. I mean, like all kinds of bad shit.
but that's the thing though, right? Um you can get hung up on like the omens and whatnot and on the good fortune of it, I mean, fucking like Dickens believed in the power of coincidence. That didn't make his stories any the weaker for it. The point is not that omens solve everything. The point is that they do what you need them to do in the moment, and then you might see something else later, right? The stones that tell him yes or
Mhm.
no, right? They answer his question once. I thought this was pretty clever. He drops them at one point when he asks them, "Will I find the treasure?" And he sees them both, and it's like yes and no. And from that point, like they're not super useful to him, but he has them nonetheless. Like you don't get hung up on one thing. You're constantly looking for guideposts and signs that'll point you in a direction. Maybe not the right direction, but it could become the right direction depending on the choices you make. And that's what it means by the world conspiring to grant you your personal legend, as long as you keep looking for it.
Yeah. I have to say, I did not know it took off in France first, but I find that really interesting because another book that this has always reminded me of a little bit is Le Petit Prince, the Little
Number
Prince.
two on the bestseller list.
Yeah, another very well-loved book around the world with popular appeal, and also a book about a naive little guy who goes around meeting a bunch of interesting people and having experiences with them and learning things about human nature and magic and stuff like that along the way. So I thought that was kind of funny when you mentioned. I meant to draw attention to that earlier, but then you kind of reminded me of it again just now. I was like, oh yeah, it's like the Little Prince.
A little bit.
I was
But
kind
that
of reading some
Mhm.
Rasselas in here as well. Like
Mm.
where like the story where it's like I'm gonna wander the world and see why people, well, who's happy, and then like everybody, every job fucking sucks, and it just like turns out that you're like just supposed to stay in your lane and make it happen. But that's a little bit more negative, but it's like the exact same structure and writing style. I
Yeah.
I have always wanted to write a modern day Rasselas though, like where it's like the guy who's like going around to modern careers and they all fucking suck as well. Um, but one thing I'll say is much like I would say the Stones in this remind me much of one of the greatest poets of our time, who said, "Flip a coin, and when it's in the air, you'll know which side you're hoping for." You know who said that?
Mm.
Is the great Justin Bieber did say that. So you know,
Hell yeah.
there's he. Uh, I'm sorry, but like the Alchemist too. Um,
That I I don't give it to Justin Bieber often, but he cooked with that
He
line.
cooked with that one. And
Uh,
that could literally be in this book though, like the flipping the coin. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Then it
yeah,
would
no,
like turn into
totally.
a bird or some shit.
He
But
flipped
like,
the coin, and at the moment it reached its apex, the boy knew which side he wanted to see. You know.
which
And then
yeah.
a bird plucked the coin out of the air, never revealing to him where it would land.
But he already had his answer.
Yes. Good, good, good. I love it.
There we
Um
uh,
go.
the
uh,
I also think the tarot side of thing, like you using that tarot example is good because it's also like you can read into it what you want to. And if you are coming at it from the perspective of someone who is very powerful and maybe shitty, you know, like Bill Clinton, we'll use an example. Um, you don't have to read into this like a strong critique of you as an individual. I mean, I still think that like, you know, there's definitely things that, you know, you're missing if you're coming from that perspective. But I think that like also this isn't something that's like necessarily attacking power or something like that. It's benefits are all like purely like kind of nutritional almost to the soul in a way that like really can apply to almost anyone. So I'm actually not shocked by the broad appeal of this book, even among
yeah,
people that we would consider to be pretty nasty characters.
Well, among
yeah.
heads of state, right? Politically it's quite anodyne. So like if you want to appear cultured, um, and appeal to the broadest possible segment of your populace, I imagine this is the sort of book you want to conspicuously consume, and you don't really read too much further into it than that. Like, Coelho says, don't come for his readers. I will come for Clinton, Putin, and Pinochet. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We did.
those ones in particular.
Kennedy, have you read or heard of The President is Missing?
No.
So Bill Clinton wrote a novel and
Oh,
He
it's
wrote some of it.
sort of. He worked with James Patterson on it. It's not as good as this. We'll say that. We
okay.
It's
just
great. I don't
thought
know
of
what
that.
you're talking about.
It cooks. Yeah. Anyway, um, we actually get to the alchemist himself at a certain point. Does anyone want to talk about that?
I think the character of the alchemist is awesome, honestly. Like if anything really slaps and hits home for me, it's some of the shit that the alchemist says and does.
Yeah.
I love when the alchemist reaches into the hole in the sand and pulls out the snake and then like charms it. And it's just like, you know, again, it's this thing that's like it's not necessarily magical, but it feels kind of magical, and I like that like magical realism layer that is applied when the alchemist is around.
Is there
Um,
something to that? Like, because I'm thinking right now of how like cats are afraid of cucumbers or whatever, right? Is there something like primal that you can speak to in a snake if you draw a circle around it?
I mean, I don't know if that specifically is true, but like obviously like snake charming is real. And I think also like I think to me, what I like about this is just how I read it. I'm not saying this is necessarily the intention, quote unquote, but
Sure.
how I read it is like I think a lot about how, we are in this situation where a lot of our elders that have sort of traditional knowledge about like farming, food, traditional medicine, things like that. And I mean real traditional medicine, not the hokey shit, but like, how do you splint a broken leg practically or things like that, right? Like uh 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 you know th- a lot of our elders are passing away without passing on all of that information. And so then like sometimes when you see someone doing one of these things that like used to be something that was an understood thing, it seems very magical sometimes.
Sure.
Like have you ever experienced this? I feel like I experience this sometimes when I watch like a an elder in the community, working on their farm or things like that.
My grandmother driving away animals with like a strange mix of herbs was very impressive to me once as a kid. I was convinced it was witchcraft. And I mean, it essentially was, right? What is witchcraft but like herbalism, you
Right, right.
know?
So
Shout
um
out to
and
Mama.
this book is exactly like that in the sense of like what is magic? Is it just reality that maybe you don't understand, or is it just it's such a complicated question, and I think it's cool that this book asks it in a very open-ended way. And The Alchemist, again, he is the perfect example of this. He is at once wondrous and just a guy. um
Hmm.
you
He
know
he he speaks the way that he speaks is intriguing to me, right? Because it's in a very um I don't want to use the word platitudes because that sounds negative, but like he speaks similarly to how Melchizedek speaks, right? Like the questions that he answers, the answers that he gives to the boys' questions are like shockingly simple. Like they sound like he's being like facetious, but like you can read a little bit below and be like, yeah, this is obvious. Like, I don't know how to find life in the desert, the boy said. I know that there is life here, but I don't know where to look. Life attracts life, the alchemist answered. You found life in the desert, the omen that I needed. Why was that so important? Because the pyramids are surrounded by the desert. Like it's very, it sounds like he's being, it sounds like he's being flippant, but he's really not, and there is a sense of digging to a remarkable simplicity at the heart of a whole bunch of abstraction, because the alchemist tells him that, yeah, everything that used to be known about alchemy, everything you needed to know about the laws of nature used to fit on like a single emerald.
Yeah, an emerald tablet, right?
Yeah,
And
literally. And
and I know
then
the boy like had made fun of the Englishman earlier in it because the Englishman was like, "Yeah, well, we've written all this about the tablet," and he's like, "So what you're telling me is you overcomplicated this shit," which is
mhm.
like, yeah, there was like some basics, and it grew out. I immediately, with like my extremely like religious background that I have, immediately thought of the whole like we had to write the whole Bible, but like love your neighbor as yourself was like right there, and then you had to like do everything around it, which is like kind of the classic thing of like humans have a thing and then we got to explain everything around it, or like
Yeah.
or this, that, or the other, and it felt very the
yeah,
same way to me.
or it made me think about how academia ruins culture.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, yeah, like we had this emerald tablet, like we, oh yeah, we had like this collective of Brooklyn artists in the 70s making paintings, just naively and from the heart. And oh, nope, now they're all worth $10 billion and we've
Right.
ruined their lives and the lives of everyone around them. And all of their art is a CIA money laundering scheme now. And,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
like, like, I don't know. It felt like there was an aspect of that in it for me. Like The Alchemist is like, yeah, dude, if you just fucking get your head out of your ass, it's like actually pretty fucking simple. And that lesson of obviousness is like, could that be any more necessary in our current political climate
Right.
where like, we're living in the post-truth era? Like obviousness is what is needed to bring us back to basic understandings of what is real, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, there's a essay by David Foster Wallace called Tracy Austin Broke My Heart that I like a lot, where he's talking about the how sports writers, or not sports writers, but how athletes, professional athletes who write usually are quite bad at writing. Um, and then comes around to because they're stating obvious things that to be an athlete of that stature, you have to just believe, like truisms. Like you have to just believe I can do anything I set my mind to. You have to just be able to believe, um, you know, talent or whatever is like hard work outdoes talent when talent doesn't work hard. Like a just sort of like a basic ass like line that you actually have to like imbue that with very deep meaning and that has to actually be true to succeed on a certain level. And I think you're absolutely right that like we're also like in a moment where we need to like find these truths, and even if they sound incredibly trite or uncomplicated or simple, we can grab them and be like, okay, but this is still true. Like, obviously we can have our sort of theoretical understanding around it, but like you can say it's cringe to be like, yeah, community is the answer, but it's like not wrong.
Mhm.
Like, things like that. Like it's not wrong that cling to community in serious times. It's not wrong to like figure out what is true and what isn't, even if sometimes it doesn't sound like the most complicated or like fleshed out analysis in the world.
No,
Or like the
100.
alchemist could like turn into a wind and like blow over the White House. That would also be helpful.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I don't think I personally don't think he turns into the wind. Like, I think he just waits for a sandstorm and then like walks over somewhere. But I also don't think it matters, right? Because like he spends all that time communicating with the wind, the desert, the sun.
Right.
He speaks to God himself at one point,
But
and
Lenore, will you just for the sake of the listeners give a little more context on that?
so at one point, they get caught by an army. The boy and the alchemist are going to the pyramids, and they get caught by an army because there's all these wars going on in the desert between various tribes, and um, he's going to be executed. But he's like, no, wait, I can turn myself into the wind. I am a sorcerer. Like, you don't want to fuck with me. And the tribal chieftain is like, okay, bet. You got 3 days. He needs 3 days, answered the alchemist. He is going to transform himself into the wind just to demonstrate his powers. If he can't do so, we humbly offer you our lives for the honor of your tribe. You can't offer me something that's already mine, the chief said arrogantly, but he granted the travelers 3 days. The boy was shaking with fear, but the alchemist helped him out of the tent. Don't let them see that you're afraid, the alchemist said. They are brave men, and they despise cowards. So it goes on a little bit. The first day passes. He doesn't know how to turn himself into the wind. Um, and on the second day is when he starts getting it, right? On the second day, the boy climbed to the top of a cliff near the camp. The sentinels allowed him to go. They'd already heard about the sorcerer who could turn himself into the wind. They didn't want to go near him. In any case, the desert was impassable. He spent the entire afternoon of the second day looking out over the desert and listening to his heart. The boy knew the desert sensed his fear. They both spoke the same language. And that's what he does. He literally talks to the deserts. The text has the desert speaking back to him. Same with the wind, same with the sun. And
And
what
I
he
actually read some of that at the top.
Yeah.
The bit where he's explaining love to the desert, and the desert's like, well, I don't fucking know, but I'll pass you up to my boss, the sky.
Mm. And the desert itself says, yeah, I don't know how to turn you into the wind.
Yeah, of course he doesn't.
Mm.
So,
Um, I love this whole part. And again, if you want to read it super literally and be a stick in the mud, never have fun, never enjoy things, fine. Um, but if you want to read it as more of this, again, it kind of comes back to that universal language concept, which I do kind of buy into it to some extent, the idea of the universal language, like not necessarily in the complete magical realism way of the novel, but in the sense of like, man, if you were like anywhere in the world with a cart full of hot dogs, you could make a friend.
yeah,
Right? like
no
like
doubt.
like if you were anywhere in the world and you had warm blankets, you could make a friend,
Hmm.
right? Like there's things like that, and I do believe that there are ways in which we are capable of communicating with and understanding each other that are simpler than language. I think we do like us, I think we do kind of ascribe this special quality to language, like it is itself magical. But it is just a tool that we have. And if we didn't have it, we would still find some way to exchange things and to communicate. And this is what humans did 100,000 years ago before we were properly humans.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna
when
say,
we
presumably we did.
but when we still did have like rituals that evidence has been left behind of, right? So
Hmm.
it's like these folks were not speaking complex English, you know?
Right.
They were not speaking a complex language like we understand it. Their tongues and mouths were not even necessarily shaped to do it, some of our pre-human ancestors. They were not using those means, and yet they were holding complex spiritual ceremonies.
Mhm.
I don't know, something to that. Like, I'm as skeptical as they come in a lot of ways. Ask my partner or any of my friends, but I don't deny the shit that is there. You
Mhm.
Sure.
know?
Well,
Well, and that's the thing, right? The so many of the specifics of what like pre Homo sapiens sapiens civilization are lost to us, right? So many of the specifics are lost to us. So much of that is guesswork and has been erased by the ravages of time and whatnot. Which is why I like there's something Melchizedek says very early on that I quite appreciate when the kid asks him, "Oh, you're the king of Salem. What's Salem like?" And Melchizedek's like, "It's like it always has been." You
hmm
know, like there's a certain point that you can't go back and like there's a certain point where you can't go back and like have that be the point that you solve that mystery from way back. Like you gotta figure out in your own context how to move forward.
Well, I liked when they asked how's Salem, and he's like, "Well, we took care of our witch problem. I'll tell you that." Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I like how the king, he seems like he could be immortal. He
hmm
seems like he could be out of time, like a time traveler. Or he sort of seems almost like an angel, like he ascended when he died or something, you know?
Or hell,
Uh,
he could be an old man at like in Amsterdam, like giving you a ring that's like actually like strung out, but it was meaningful to you in that moment. You
Mm,
know,
yeah,
we were
maybe
talking.
he's just an old guy that just made a gilded breastplate and walks around. I mean, that's pretty dope.
Right, like because we were talking about earlier, like obviously this author having his own experiences that, we can say he maybe embellished a little bit, but that clearly was meaningful enough for him to carry a ring around his entire life, right?
mhm.
Like a moment in your life that moves you forward in some tangible way. And whether or not that was like given to you by God is almost immaterial given like what actions you choose to take with the agency that gives you. Um,
Yeah, it may mean something only to you, but it doesn't need to be meaningful to somebody else if it propels you forward. And that's what separates Quelio from Mishima in my mind, from somebody who said that curiosity is like the greatest vice that a man can have, right? Quelio is like, yeah, go out into the world, act on it, for a political purpose or not, like realize what your purpose is and pursue it and be willing to have that be malleable.
there's a pretty significant divide in the violent gay sex being had also between Mishima and Quelyu, though, with the seppuku and whatnot going on. But that's a whole. But that's also a more important divide. I we really did drop the ball by not talking about that aspect of things on our episode, Lenore. But so it goes.
The bit
Um,
about like Yuki Mishima meeting the guy for sex and like he just wants to like RP like seppuku.
yeah, insane. Um, Such a cool guy. But I'll say Ryan, you can cut that if you want. That's nonsensical if you haven't listened to the Mishima episode. Uh,
It propels us forward, Jacob.
It does. It propels us forward into the last words the alchemist says to the boy, which is no matter what he does, every person on earth plays a central role in the history of the world, and normally he doesn't know it. And this is
Mhm.
another thing that is like both fundamentally true and kind of like I'm 14 and this is deep. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
this is a thing that like simultaneously, depending on the delivery, I would roll my eyes or say that's cool. And because it like rocks the way it's given by this figure that I've come to respect, who is imparting truth in simple ways, I respect the shit out of it. Now, if it was like on a guy's wall that I didn't like, I would like also laugh at it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just like my experience of this thing.
If
No,
it's
yeah,
on
no.
Pinochet's shelf.
Oh my God, could you imagine? It's on Pinochet. He's like got a tattoo.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, so like my most recent reread was during a dark time in my life. I was going through a painful breakup.
Mhm,
This person like left me in a bad state
mhm,
financially, emotionally, and in other ways, you know?
mhm,
And because of that, there was this period where I was trying to figure out how to make more money, and I was like editing videos at night and landscaping in the day, and like, and I just re-listened to this book, and in that moment, I was like, man, this book is like, this is exactly I just need someone to tell me to carry on right now, you
right.
know?
Hmm.
But like there was another time I tried to reread this book about 8 years ago, And I was like, this sucks. So like I kind of understand like why people don't always vibe with it, you know? I think it's but I think if he had written it some other way, if he had written it to be more political, more philosophical, more religious, more biblical, more this, more that, that it would have not had the intended effect. Because what's great about it is how non-alienating it is.
Hmm.
I think, you know, because of so many factors in this story, it's easy to see yourself in it, even if you come from a humble situation, or even if you come from, you know, this or that kind of trauma, or, you know, it's like this boy comes from plenty of rough circumstances,
Mhm.
all things considered, in a lot of ways. And, you know, you can't do much more of a climb than from, you know, wandering shepherd without a home to wealthy ass dude, right? Like that's a pretty huge climb. So I think like I don't know, I think and just so many parts of his different parts of his story are very universal in different ways. And so I think like yes, you can be mad at this book for being a little thin. And again, I even am this person sometimes.
Right.
Like, but when I need that comfort of just that reassurance and I listen to it or read some of it, you know, it's beautiful poetry that's just
Right.
telling you, don't stop, believe in yourself. And telling you that message over and over again in different ways so that you know, if you don't hear it in chapter 1, you might hear it in chapter 4, and if you don't hear it in chapter 4, you might hear it in chapter 9. That's kind of cool. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes we need complex advice and sometimes we need like basic shit. And like there are different places where we need those things. And it but like I do find it really interesting. And it's like really kind of the end here, but like that there really is a chest full of treasure. Like, yeah, it is back where he came from, but there is like a genuine chest full of treasure. I kind of expected there not to be. I kind of expected, I don't know, maybe I've just seen too many kids that treasure was the friends we made along the way type shit. Um, but like I didn't expect there to be actual gold, but I guess it's just like for your trouble. But then he, after finding the gold in Spain, returns to the Oasis, to Fatima. We didn't really talk about her because, like, in my opinion, there's not really a tremendous amount to say about her, but she
Yeah,
is
if
a,
there's one criticism that's completely fair about this book, it doesn't really feature women.
yeah, she's like there and she's just kind of exists for him to be like down bad for. And then she's like, I'm a
Hmm.
woman. I know how to wait on men in the desert. And then she blows a kiss on the wind, and that's kind of nice, I guess.
Well, and that's the thing. Like it's the treasure is the thing that he has the dream about, right? But
Sure.
it's by no means the end of his story. It's just another step in, it's another step on the road to getting back to Fatima, and then who knows what's beyond that, you know?
He has a
It's
dream of like the One Piece. I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
I did want to make a One Piece joke earlier. I don't actually watch that show though, so I
Neither
was
do I.
like, this could be a thin joke. I just have one of my very good friends watches One Piece obsessively and tells me about it all the time.
Lenore, do you know about One Piece? Did the joke make sense?
I have only watched the Netflix live action One Piece,
Oh my God.
with which they
Wait,
cooked.
actually? Huh.
Yeah, no, it's
Different
good.
conversation.
I've heard it's really good.
It is.
Interesting.
It's as
Interesting.
it's like as faithful as a live action anime adaptation I think can get. Not just to the story because I don't really have a lot of experience with the One Piece story, but with the vibe, right? It's very very earnest and really doesn't it doesn't go in for that whole like cynical like yeah haha this is childish. It's 100% committed to the bit.
Okay, committed to the bit is good.
And you know what else is 100% committed to the bit in that way? The Alchemist.
Let's
There
go.
really is
Yeah.
a comparison here, actually.
It
Um,
connects.
and
Alchemist
I
anime
think
win.
that's why there is a literal chest of treasure and
Yeah.
not just some metaphor, is to just have that. And it's a bit of hope where you don't expect it. I think most people on your first read of this book, you are not expecting him to find that treasure chest,
Yeah.
which again gets back to why some of these criticisms are a little annoying because it's like, oh, everything's so obvious and it just works out for him. You didn't know he was gonna find the treasure. Fuck off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fuck off. You
That's
thought it
true.
was the friends he made along the way. We
Because he
all
does,
did.
because he does make friends along the way. He does make back his fortune several times over. He doesn't need to find the gold, but sometimes good things happen.
Yeah, some of his friends kind of suck though. So like the Englishman, he's still presumably doing equations in the Oasis. He gets back and he's like didn't know the boy left and he's like still looking around for the alchemist. Writing a side parable of the Englishman could be interesting. But at the very end, I want to read the very end of the book. It says, "The wind, because I think it's pretty. The wind began to blow again. It was the Levanter, the wind that came from Africa. It didn't bring with it the smell of the desert nor the threat of Moorish invasion. Instead, it brought the scent of a perfume he knew well and the touch of a kiss that came from far away, slowly, slowly, until it rested on his lips. The boy smiled. It was the first time she had done that. I'm coming, Fatima, he said. And that's the end of the book, which is interesting because it is actually not because Fatima's particularly well fleshed out, but because it is like now there is another thing to pursue, right? Life brought him the next step, like a sort of vision, sort of real experience, as this book is, this magical realism of this kiss blown from the desert. Um, and now he's got the next step in his journey and it's connected to the steps he made earlier, and he actually would not be at this step of the journey if he had not sort of left her behind earlier in the journey. And I find that to be like
Right.
interesting and constructive as well, in like sort of a circular way.
I also find it interesting that, he starts off the journey wanting to impress that like merchant's daughter, and then he ends the journey having found this more profound love.
Yeah.
There's something kind of, even if the book doesn't really get enough into who she either of these women are, and blah blah blah. There's still something a little bit, I think, profound and interesting about that too. Like, yeah, you don't always know what you want. And in fact, that kind of contradicts what the old king tells the boy in a way. And I think the book contradicts itself on purpose
Yeah.
sometimes. I don't know.
True.
I think that's neat. I think there's a lot of neat things about it. I don't think it's a perfect book, but I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of neat things about it. And I think that's a beautiful way to end it. I think it's very poetic and beautiful. If nothing else, if you can't just enjoy the flowery prose, these gorgeous descriptions of the desert, maybe I'm biased. I live in love a desert, but you know, I don't know. Come on, folks.
If it's not impressing you, go listen to Jeremy Irons read it, and then you might be more impressed than me reading it. You know, that scar ass voice right there.
And in
That
particular, the,
might
the
bring it to you.
voices that he does for the sun and the wind, like the pieces of nature that just sound like regular dudes, I think I like genuinely, like it's very, very funny to listen to at first, but also, I mean, it does contribute to that theme of, hey, these are forces of nature, but in the end, they, like you, are a part of this whole that you're trying to navigate.
No
Yeah.
doubt. Do either of you have any last thoughts about this book before we close this one out?
99% of alchemists die of thirst just when the palm trees appear on the horizon.
So true. So true.
Brutal. I think regardless of whatever cringy feelings you may have about the author, if you find yourself in a dark place, this is a good book.
Hmm. If you find yourself in a dark place, you could also check out some of the projects that Kennedy's working on. Kennedy, do you have anything to plug here? What kind of stuff are you up to these days?
Yeah, yeah. You mind if I talk my projects for a second?
Do it.
Please.
I have a few different things going on. I'm usually on The Worst Week Yet, which is a podcast about the news. We try to make it as funny as we can. We can't make every news story funny, but we do our best.
You do
Uh,
quite well. I just editorializing here, but I quite enjoy Worst Week Yet. It's why I reached out in the first place.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll definitely be working on getting y'all over to that side of
Oh, hell
things.
yeah.
And bringing some more folks from there, the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so check that out if you've never heard it. We try to have some fun with it, and we also do stuff like usually torture ourselves with bad movies over on the Patreon. Uh,
Yes.
so if that interests you, and you like the show, you can become a supporter, and it actually does put meaningful amounts of money in the pockets of people that
Mhm.
are not that wealthy. Um,
No chests of gold on your end,
Right,
unfortunately.
right, right, right. So there's that. I also have another show called The Most Important Election of Our Lives. It's a show where you can vote every day. Vote right now.
Let's
Fuck
Um,
go.
yeah. We're ready to
uh,
vote right now if we could.
this is also a show I'd be happy to have one or both of you come on at some point. This is a show where we ask our guests about a fictional property that they like, and then we come up with some questions they're not expecting relating that fictional property to political history.
Oh,
Um,
hell yeah.
and and it usually gets very silly very fast.
I gotta
It
listen
is
to this. Is this a newer thing?
This is a newer show. Yes, there's only about, I think we've published 6 or maybe 7 episodes. We might have one that's on its way, not quite
Okay,
out.
great.
Um,
Yeah, listeners,
uh,
catch up.
yeah, it's a fun time. We've had some wonderful folks on, and already, and I think it's gonna be a great show. And also, you should just follow me on Blue Sky if you don't, because I've got some really cool projects in the works that I don't really have a place to direct you to for yet, but some really cool stuff involving independent film, both things that I'm creating, but also I've been trying for a few years to really make independent film a little bit more accessible to people in my city and just in general. And I'm kind of working on some projects in that direction. If that sounds cool to you, if you heard that and went, "Wow, that sounds neat," then give me a follow on Blue Sky. It's kennedytcooper.bsky.social. And that's the main place that I post. So
And all of this will be linked in the show notes as well. We will come through on that. No doubt, no doubt. Well, Kennedy, super appreciate you. And for the listeners, if you're keeping up, next week we will be talking. It'll be our second graphic novel we've talked about. It's been a minute. Raymond Briggs, When the Wind Blows, and we will be having a fan favorite
Yes.
return for that one.
ooh.
So keep your eyes open, your ears open, I guess. I don't know for that one. Lenore, do you have anything to close us on, or did you already blow your closer with the 99% Alchemist joke?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just saying, like, you can don't be so quick to resign yourself to that 99% of alchemists, right? Like, we will all be the 1%.
That is not how we're closing this show. We are not all striving to be the 1%. Uh uh
How about when the English send their men to the desert? Some of them, I assume, are good people.
some of them I assume are good people, but the English, they're not sending their best. All
No,
right,
no.
folks. Thank you. You have a good one.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.